You cannot change somebody who is not ready to change. You cannot make somebody believe something that you know to be true just because you know they need to know it. You cannot convince somebody to your way of thinking or believing just because you know something that you don't think they do. And this has been one of my own personal biggest lessons in my business, in my relationship, and a lesson that I've honestly probably learned multiple times over, and that I see happening all the time. And it's not just about like convincing somebody that, they should believe a certain thing, but it's from a sales perspective, convincing people that aren't really ready for your offers, your property, who aren't the right fit, just because you're trying to make a sale, just because you know that it would be perfect for them or it would change their life. But the thing is you can't make somebody meet you where you're at. They have to come there on their own. But when they do, it's so amazing. And I actually just had one of the best conversations with somebody close to me who honestly was a massive skeptic to a lot of the things that I personally know to be true from my own personal experiences, that aligns very much to my own belief system. But this is somebody who a year ago, if I had said the things to me that she had been skeptical about, or that she personally experienced and said, you need to do this, it's totally legit, she would have turned her nose up and said, I don't believe it. In fact, she has said similar things about some of the things that I say and believe in. And in my marriage, that was one of the biggest challenges for me to work through, not to get to a point where my husband and I believe the same thing, but for me to recognize that we didn't have to have the same beliefs to coexist, that I didn't need to convince him to change in order for me to feel more comfortable, for me to feel more seen. Because one of the biggest issues for me had always been I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like he believed in me because he didn't have the same beliefs as me, and sometimes honestly would question them. And so I would try to convince, or I would try to say, well, this is the reason that I believe this, and this is why you should believe it too. And honestly, oftentimes it backfired on me. And this person that I was talking to was not my husband, but that is one personally for me that has been an ongoing thing, and something I absolutely see in a lot of the people that I work with, both in their romantic relationships and other, relationships that are close to them. But this person that I was talking to, total 180, like someone who's like, if you don't give me facts, proof of why this is real, of why this is true, I don't believe it. From that to having a conversation where this person is telling me about how they spoke with basically a medium who had channeled messages from like parents and like siblings and stuff who had passed away, and how it was like so spot on. And now she's a believer. And I was having a conversation again recently with somebody else, completely different, totally different topic, about flat earthers, which P.S. I don't believe that the earth is flat. I just want to say that. And my husband and I had actually had a discussion about this because some podcast that he likes to watch had been featuring a former reformed flat earther who had gone to Antarctica, I believe it was, and on this trip with people who definitely were not flat earthers, to show this person that, like, hey, the earth is actually round. And this is somebody apparently who had this big platform, had a lot of followers who believe the same things. And he went there and he's like, no, mine changed. I now see that the earth is in fact round and I can't deny it. But sometimes until you actually experience things, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to get it. You're not going to resonate with it. And this is, again, whether it's a belief system, whether it's an offer that someone's trying to sell you and is right for them, or whether you're trying to sell an offer to someone is right for them, or whether it's a property, And I've been having a lot of conversations recently with people who own properties, and specifically those who sell to retreat leaders and, do transformational retreats at their properties. And, or they're just positioned in a way that they just sound like another hotel, and they're trying to sell their facility to people for top dollar who really truly aren't meant to be there. And it's not because it's not a beautiful property. It's not because they don't have a lot to offer. It's just because that person does not see the value in that property. They don't see the value in spending that kind of money on that facility, because they just value the heads in the beds. They just value the place, or having a place, but not necessarily enough to pay certain rates to have a certain experience. And part of this is positioning, but also part of it is it's like the positioning speaking to the wrong people. And I see it happening again in people's lives, in their relationships. I see it happening in business, in conversations. And to a point, I talk about apologies, I could not pause in time and a loud vehicle went by. Like I said, sometimes I talk about this being an issue of speaking with conviction, and that's definitely a part of it when it comes to branding and marketing and such. But part of that is that you're not speaking with conviction, and therefore you keep attracting people that don't value what it is that you have to offer, the transformation, the property, the experience, instead of actually talking to the people that do. And it's no different than me having these conversations with, this person in my life who a year ago I could have talked till I was blue in the face, and they just weren't ready to hear what I had to say. They needed to figure it out for themselves. Same thing, if the retreat leader who may not be ready right now might be ready in a year. But if you just keep talking and trying to convince them, they're not going to listen. They're going to write you off. Or they're going to be like, this person's way too expensive, they're way too pushy, they're way too blah, 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 versus just talk to the people who are actually right for your work, for your offers, for your property. Talk to the people who are actually ready to have the conversations about the things that interest you, instead of trying to convince those who aren't ready, who aren't right. And then continuing to frustrate yourself, continuing to not make the money you want, continuing to end up in arguments, continuing to do these things as you're trying to change other people's minds, when in reality, the only thing that you can actually change is yourself. The only thing that you can actually do is become so convicted in knowing in your own belief systems and what you have to offer. And I'm talking in parallels here because it's the same, whether it's your life, your work, your business. Stop trying to change other people. Stop trying to change their minds. Stop trying to convince people that they need you, and start actually speaking about the things that matter to you. Start letting your voice be heard. Stop trying to convince and start trying to be you for the people who are actually here for it. And stop watering down what you want to say, or speaking to the people who aren't the right ones to actually hear what it is that you have to say, because those are kind of overlapping. And I guess I didn't necessarily speak to all of that, but because again, when I would be talking to this person, I wouldn't necessarily be trying to convince them sometimes, but it would be like trying to water it down or say it in a way that they would get it. Or the same thing like with my husband, like trying to water down what I was trying to say, or like put a spin on it so that he would start to believe it. But in reality, he never was going to. He was never going to value what I had to say. So then to me, that just ends up in frustration. And again, it's the same thing with purchasing. It's the same thing with marketing. It's the same thing across the board. When you learn to speak from your truest expression, when you learn that you don't have to convince anybody of anything, when you learn that what you have to say, what you know to be true, who you are at your core is valuable enough, that's when you start to convert more. That's when you start to attract higher paying people. That's when your relationships start to shift before your eyes. When someone who used to argue with you starts to be attracted to you, that's how life, business, money starts to shift and change without you having to actually do anything. So that's my little message for today. And if it resonated for you, please drop let's just say a microphone emoji in the comments, or reach out to me and let's have a conversation about what's coming up for you around these days and how I might support you in actually stepping fully into your own expression, into what you know to be true, and actually owning who you are, the life you're here to live, and the things that you have to fucking say. Talk soon.